Is 2025 Bordeaux the best buying opportunity in nearly 20 years? I don't ask that question lightly. Over more than 3 decades of collecting Bordeaux, I have lived through countless declarations of the vintage of the decade, and even the vintage of the century. Those headlines have always made me cautious, because red vintages do not necessarily make great buying opportunities. What matters is where quality and price meet. From my own Primeur tastings, 2025 feels like a more precise, less bombastic 2010 with the linear poise and freshness of 2016. Yet, what impressed me most wasn't simply the quality of the wines, it was the pricing. Many leading craft growers are being released at around 50 to 60% of the current market prices for the outstanding 2020 and 2022 vintages. I struggle to recall another campaign where wines of this caliber have been accompanied by such a significant price correction. I bought Bordeaux futures enthusiastically from the 1980s through the 2005 vintage, but much less thereafter, discouraged by the increasingly erratic pricing of many subsequent campaigns. However, for the first time in many years, I'm seriously considering rebuilding part of my cellar through en primeur. Today, I will explain why I believe 2025 represents one of Bordeaux's most compelling buying opportunities in recent memory, walk you through the 6 left bank crus classés that impressed me most, and ultimately tell you which bottles I would buy today depending on your budget. And before we begin, if you are still discovering your own palate, buy 3 or 6 bottles rather than a full case of 12. A cellar should evolve alongside your taste. The 2025 vintage. Before we discuss the wines, it's worth understanding why I think 2025 is such an unusual vintage. On paper, the growing season suggested another powerful, sun-filled year. Yet, the finished wines tell a different story. Overall, 2025 delivers concentration without weight. Historically low yields, coupled with cool nights throughout the growing season, produce wines that are fresher, more precise, and more refined than the hot summer might suggest. To my palate, the vintage combines the concentration of 2010 with the structure and the linearity of 2016, while avoiding the sheer richness of 2022. Rather than delivering muscle for its own sake, 2025 impresses through restraint. Alcohols remain measured. The aromatics are beautifully defined. The tannins are refined rather than aggressive. It's a vintage that promised power but ultimately delivered elegance. Perhaps most importantly, success clearly belongs to the very best terroirs and the estates that farmed and vinified with precision. For collectors, that's exactly the sort of vintage I like to buy. My buying framework. Rather than selecting the highest scoring wines, I have asked myself a much simpler question. If I were rebuilding my cellar today, which bottles would I actually spend my own money on? I have chosen wines across a range of prices because not every collector has the same budget. These are estates I have followed across multiple vintages, many of which have become long-standing fixtures in my own cellar. These bottles are from previous vintages I have bought from these 6 properties. This is how I remember each of them from my 2025 en primeur tastings, and more importantly, why I believe they deserve serious consideration today. At $30, Château Lagune. If your budget is around $30, I think Château Lagune remains one of Bordeaux's most dependable bargains. I've bought this chateau over many vintages because it consistently delivers more than its price suggests. The 2025 continues that tradition. Bright red fruit, blood orange, cedar, mint, and dried flowers give the wine remarkable energy without excess weight. The palate is velvety, yet lively, combining flesh with freshness and finishing with beautiful floral lift. Compared with previous vintages, I found the fruit purer and the tannins more finely sculpted. Everything feels more precise, more focused, and more complete. At around $30, the wine is approximately 42% cheaper than today's prices for both the 2020 and 2022. For anyone beginning a Bordeaux cellar, this would be one of my easiest recommendations. The blend of the 2025 is 41% Cabernet Sauvignon, 50% Merlot, and 9% Petit Verdot. At $55, Château Grand-Puy-Lacoste. Around $55, Château Grand-Puy-Lacoste becomes one of the campaign's standout buys. I have followed Grand-Puy-Lacoste for many years, and this is one of the most refined young examples I can remember tasting. Classic Pauillac notes of cassis, graphite, crushed stone, and subtle florons are supported by remarkable harmony and persistence. Compared with previous vintages, I found greater precision and coherence. Improvements, I believe, reflect the estate's new gravity-fed cellar and its increasingly meticulous parcel selection. At approximately 39% below the current prices of the 2020 and 2022, I think this represents outstanding collector value. The blend of the 2025 is 76% Cabernet Sauvignon and 24% Merlot. At $70, Château Rauzan-Ségla. If your budget stretches to around $70, Rauzan-Ségla would be my Margaux of choice. The nose combines red and black fruits with mocha, licorice, graphite, lavender, and subtle spice. The palate is beautifully chiseled, vibrant, and layered, balancing richness with remarkable freshness and precision. This is one of the finest Rauzan-Séglas I have encountered in recent years, and a wine with considerable aging potential. At roughly 44% below today's prices for the 2020 and 2022 vintages, I think it offers exceptional value. The blend of the 2025 is 65% Cabernet Sauvignon, 33% Merlot, 1.5% Petit Verdot, and 0.5% Cabernet Franc. At $90, Château Pontet-Canet. Pontet-Canet has become one of Bordeaux's most consistent performers over the past 2 decades. The 2025 is no exception. Sweet cassis, wild berries, graphite, herbs, violet, and subtle earth lead into a palate that is both seductive and disciplined. The fruit is energetic, the tannins beautifully grained, and despite its concentration, the wine remains remarkably fresh. This strikes me as one of the vintage's great collector wines. Understated today, but built for decades of evolution. At around $90, roughly 33% below the current prices of the 2020 and 2022, I think it represents outstanding value. The blend of the 2025 is 56% Cabernet Sauvignon, 39% Merlot, 4% Cabernet Franc, and 1% Petit Verdot. At $120, Château Cos d'Estournel. Among the wines I tasted, Cos d'Estournel left one of the strongest impressions. The wine combines blackberry, blackcurrant, tobacco, sandalwood, Asian spices, graphite, and violet with extraordinary depth and freshness. Despite its scale, the balance is exceptional. The tannins are beautifully integrated, the mineral backbone immense, and the finish remains vibrant rather than heavy. This is one of the wines of the vintage. At roughly $120, around 55% below current prices of the 2020 and 2022, I think it represents one of Bordeaux's best buying opportunities this year. The blend of the 2025 is 60% Cabernet Sauvignon, 39% Merlot, and 1% Petit Verdot. At $150, Château Léoville-Lascaz. If I were choosing one flagship purchase from the campaign, Léoville-Lascaz would be extremely difficult to overlook. Black cherry, blackberry, graphite, plum, and floral notes lead into a wine of immense depth, precision, and structure. At this stage, it shows more Pauillac power than classic Saint-Julien charm, with its formidable tannic structure still dominating the fruit. But that's precisely why collectors buy wines like this. They reward patience. To me, the 2025 once again confirms that Léoville sits comfortably alongside many first rows in quality. At roughly $150, some 55% below the current prices of the 2020 and 2022, I believe it is one of the defining wines of the campaign. The blend of the 2025 is 82% Cabernet Sauvignon, 12% Cabernet Franc, and 6% Merlot. The verdict. So, would I buy 2025 Bordeaux en Primeur? Yes, wholeheartedly. Not because every chateau succeeded, and not because 2025 is necessarily the greatest Bordeaux vintage ever produced. I would buy because quality and price have finally come back into alignment. For the first time in many years, buying futures, once again, feels like a decision driven by value rather than hype. If I were rebuilding my cellar today, these would be my choices among the left bank crus placés. Around $30, Château La Lagune. Around $55, Château Grand-Puy-Lacoste. Around $70, Château Rauzan-Ségla. Around $90, Château Pontet-Canet. Around $120, Château Cos d'Estornel. Around $150, Château Léoville. There are, of course, many other excellent wines in this outstanding vintage, but within their respective price brackets, these are the bottles that gave me the greatest confidence as both a drinker and a collector. These are the wines I would happily make room for in my own cellar. One of the greatest mistakes collectors make is believing that every wet vintage is automatically a great buying opportunity. In my experience, that's rarely true. The truly memorable campaigns are those where exceptional quality is matched with sensible pricing. For me, 2025 is one of those rare campaigns. If you are planning to buy Bordeaux futures this year, I would love to know which wines have made your shortlist, so let me know in the comment section below. You will find more of my cellar insights and tasting notes on Instagram. Massive thanks for watching today, and I will see you in the next one.